Meet Dan Tehan. Dan's been hanging around federal parliament since 2010. Before that, he worked in various political roles. Senior advisor, chief of staff, that sort of thing. Dan Tehan appeared on a recent episode of QandA. Before we take a look at the next couple of clips, I think there's something you should know. Every year we're paying a couple of $100,000 for Dan to take up some space in Parliament. Conservatively, we as taxpayers have probably spent around $3 to $3.5 million for Dan to warm a parliamentary seat. As a cabinet minister, he'd have been bringing in around $350,000 plus electorate allowances each year. And even now, as a shadow minister, he'd be on around $270,000 plus, thanks to a recent pay rise. I've provided all this as background because you'd think that as a parliamentarian on that sort of salary, old Dan would have at least sat down to learn about basic government stuff like the Constitution and legislation. Nope. I guess he was too busy running the family trust and keeping track of his many investment properties to worry about that sort of thing. Did I mention he's also part owner of a racehorse? I'll spare you the long-winded regurgitation of two of the many falsehoods put forward by those pushing the no case at the referendum. That is, that there's not enough detail and that the voice is a risky proposition that can't be changed. Here's Dan summarising.
We don't know. So when they set up the committee, would they have equal numbers of Liberal and Labor on the committee?
Dan.
No, they wouldn't.
Fortunately, Noel Pearson was on hand to deliver a complimentary lesson.
So it's sort of missing the point, mate.
This is what, how I'm missing the point.
This is what the provision says.
Yeah.
The Parliament shall have the power to make laws. The Parliament shall have the power to make laws. We're just talking about a constitutional power as opposed to the legislation. The legislation is your responsibility as a parliamentarian and Mullendery's responsibility as a parliamentarian to create the legislation after the referendum is secured. And not only that, in 5 years' time, you can change it. You have a full power to repeal it and replace it. That is the role of the Parliament. Parliament's responsible for the details, and that detail is in legislation that you guys pass. So you can propose a model today and say there's going to be 24 members, but you have a complete ability in 3 years' time to reduce it to 18 or increase it to 32. You know, those details can always change subject to the Parliament's actions in creating laws. You're conflating the creation of legislation with the adoption of a constitutional referendum. The problem, what you guys have been doing over the last 6 months or 8 months, you guys have been disavowing your responsibility in creating the detail. You've got the power to legislate here.
It is true that you do have some power as a parliamentarian to construct this thing, right?
Well, if it was a legislative voice, yes, there is some power. But what?
No, that's not technically true. We have to talk to facts
I think
here.
we are talking
to
the Constitution creates it and then the Parliament legislates it.
Yes, yes. So, but once it's in the Constitution, it cannot be changed, or to change it, you have to go to a referendum.
Oh, my goodness.
No, that's not true.
It is true. Well, how true? Yeah. So once, you're saying that once the voice is enshrined in the Constitution, that if it were to change that, we wouldn't have to go to another referendum.
You can change the voice, you wouldn't be able to abolish it, right?
No, we wouldn't be able to abolish it.
Again, thankfully, Noel Pearson is on hand to help poor old Dan out.
Dan, I think you misunderstand the difference between the constitutional provision and the laws that are generated pursuant to it. You've got to separate the two things out. The constitutional provision can't be abolished, but the legislation can be chopped and changed for decades and decades to come.
So let me clarify before we go to our next question. If there was a change of government and Dan Tehan, the Liberal Party, wanted a different kind of voice, you could do that, right?
Completely.
Do you agree, Dan?
Well, you could, but it doesn't you could change the legislation.
You just couldn't get rid of it.
No, you can't get rid of it.
No, but honestly, because I'm a stickler for facts, sorry, and I know this area well. You couldn't get rid of it, but you could change it.
So eventually, as Dan Tehan finally concedes, it's the Parliament's responsibility to determine how the voice will work. Now, the fact that Dan needed all that explained to him tells me that either he has no idea, in which case he shouldn't be in Parliament, or he's deliberately trying to mislead, in which case he really doesn't belong in Parliament. So when the opposition talk about the detail, the important bit they're leaving out is that they, as members of Parliament, will be partly responsible for that detail. The referendum enshrines the voice in the Constitution, but it does not dictate how it will function. That's a job for the parliamentarians. And maybe that's the problem Dutton and his friends have with the voice. Maybe us expecting them to do their job is just a bridge too far.
In conclusion,
for me, these clips are the perfect case study for just how quickly the mainstream no arguments fall apart under even the slightest scrutiny. It's a bit of a shame, really, we haven't seen more of this in the lead up to the referendum.